The House has resumed. Members, the House is considering the first reading of the Spending Cap People's Veto Bill. Paseta Sam Lotto Inga had the call. Some other member seeking the call? Rahui Katini.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Spending Cap People's Veto Bill seeks to impose a constitutional limit on spending as a sure way to create fiscal health. The Māori Party believes this legislation must be opposed at all costs. As other speakers have noted, in the United States, similar laws have been used to bring several states to financial ruin, leading to massive cuts in social services. 30 states already limit how much their legislature can spend or raise revenues, devastating funding for education and essential public services in their wake. While we appreciate the intention is to prevent the state from ever again accumulating a deficit like the one it faces now, simply placing limits is a draconian measure designed to just appeal to popular conservatism. Tea Party Republicans have brought the states to the brink of collapse a couple of weeks ago when they exercised a veto over raising the federal spending cap. The real reason for this bill coming up now is because National is seeking to tidy up loose ends with the confidence agreement it has with ACT. In essence, this is the desperate breaths of a party seeking to have some influence in the last 7 days of government work programme. But we say in the strongest possible terms, this must not be ACT's legacy to New Zealand. The motivation for Mr Hyde bringing this bill today is to protect the wealthy from having to pay their share of tax. As a parliament, we must be wary of any popularist attempts to conjure up voting power lacking sound rationale or academic justification. Spending discipline is an important ingredient in any recipe to fix the state's budget. But putting in place a pre-imposed fiscal cap is a recipe for disaster. And if our constituents need any proof of that, we would simply remind them of the spectacle of the fiscal envelope. I might remind the National Party of that bleak period in our history. The late Hepi Te Hiuhiu attracted 100% support from iwi for his stand against this approach. The genesis of the fiscal envelope was that one fixed amount was offered to settle all claims forever, approximately 3% of all appropriations for 1 year. The $1 billion fiscal envelope compared miserably with other transactions of the Crown, leading Māori to believe they were locked into an unhappy relationship with the Crown. At the time, the fiscal envelope was seen as the final straw. A fiscal envelope of $1 billion for the settlement of all historical claims was in effect a definitive limit on what the Crown would pay out in settlements. Māori vehemently rejected such a limitation in advance of the extent of claims being fully known, and as a consequence, the fiscal envelope was subsequently dropped after the 1996 general election. One might have thought that governments would have learnt from their mistakes. Internationally too, the concept of a preordained limit has been met with comparable heat and fury as the fiscal envelope fiasco. What we have seen happen in Colorado is that their roads declined to the worst shape since the state started monitoring them. The contribution to higher education funding fell from 60% to 40%, and revenues returned to pre-recession levels. When the economy was restored to a more positive state of health, it was almost impossible to make up what they had cut, a decision which was essentially devastating to public services. I found some devastating information about the spending cap concept from Rich Jones, Director of Policy and Research for the Bell Policy Centre, a progressive research group based in Denver. According to Rich Jones, and I quote, "It's been particularly negative on state government and its ability to retain and raise the amount of revenues that it needs to function effectively." Of course, we are all in favour of any proposals to rein in spending and lower taxes. It's about value for money, and we're as keen as the next party to look at that. But there are other things we could do which could tell us about effectiveness, efficiency and the best value for our dollar. For example, we could get the Office of the Controller and Auditor General to report annually on the effectiveness and of interventions targeted at Māori, Pacific, refugee and migrant communities as well as young people. How effectively is the taxpayer dollar in this regard? We could be asking for an annual report on the capability of the state sector to achieve outcomes for Māori. We need, as Nanaia Mahuta said earlier, to be discussing the real issues about value for money for government. We want to see more community services and less government bureaucracy for the outcome of whānau restoration. That is the best way of controlling debt, of creating prosperity and growth, not a rigidly imposed fiscal envelope of axe making. What we really need to see, and what the Māori Party is determined we will see, is to make the government more accountable and transparent through the unbundling of public money spent on tangata whenua. Kia ora.
Darian.